Hello. So this talk is playing doctor. This talk is about what we can learn on... Chris Roberts was not lying. Patient engagement. Put it by the water bottle. Just spill it. Okay. I absolve you of your sins. All right. It may take more water than that. You guys see the number 2 million? More water, lots more water. 2 million, right? 2 million is the number that we keep talking about when we do recruiting. 2 million is the number that we keep talking about for universities. 2 million is the number that ISACA said there's going to be IT security jobs in 2020. That sounds really cool. We're like, 2 million jobs, 2 million more of us, 2 million more people at BSides and at Converge and all this sorts of exciting stuff. They're like, yeah. And then I started thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, really? Really? We're going to have 2 million people? Anyone at security walk around, people are like, security guy, I love you. You are amazing. No.
Not unless they're drunk.
Not unless they're drunk. Well, yeah. And then the IT guys are like, come over here, let me tell you what's been going on. You won't believe. And they get in trouble from the director or CIO the next day. We're not doing a very good job at securing things, as we hear over and over again. Chris just nailed it home, right? We've been talking about it for 15, 20 years. And we're still seeing a lot of the same problems. And I get very concerned about that because I want to win. I get very concerned about it because I want to hire 2 million people. I get very concerned about that because I want to keep going to B-sides and keep having a good time. So the past couple of years, I've been looking at different ways to solve this problem. I did spent a year looking at threat modeling, what Ian was talking about, right? How can we use threat modeling to drive behavior so the IT guy does the right thing? Because the security guy doesn't usually get to do the right thing. It's usually someone else, so the IT guy. And I spent like 2 years hanging out with developers. And I'm like, how do I make sure that you write the right code? And they're like, we'll write the right code. And we're like, great. And then I walk away and they don't write the right code. I'm like, what did I do wrong? So I spent a lot of time looking at how we could do SDLCs so that the developers do the right thing. And if you guys caught my talk earlier today, right now what I'm doing is spending a lot of time with the operational folks saying, okay, how can I empower you so that you do the right thing? So that when you deploy the right cow milker or meat slicer or whatever it is, that the controls are thought about and in place. And that kind of gets us today, because each one of these things, each one of these areas has the same problem. The same problem is engagement. How do we engage the right people to do the right action? And so as we're thinking about this and I'm looking for solutions, I ran across this talk. Highly recommend it. Shout out to Dr. Whom. Turn Your Head and Cough. What a phenomenal title. Turn Your Head and Cough. Does not really make me want to see that. But anyways, it was a good talk. And what he pointed out was, hey, we could really learn a lot about from doctors. We could really think about our security assessment reviews as being medical, right? And look at what great things doctors do. Because patients are kind of like the people we're dealing with, right? They lie to us. They don't necessarily listen. They don't necessarily do the right thing. So I like this talk. Take a look at this talk, the Turn Your Head and Cough. YouTube's down there. This is like the unofficial sequel to that talk. And as I was talking to Steph, who I'm going to introduce in a moment, I'm like, hey, I'll show you mine. You show me yours. And of course, what I was talking about there is Blue Team security and patient engagement, because she deals with doctors. And so we thought it might be interesting to pull that doctor world in, share it with you guys, and see what we could learn so that we can be around in 2020 so we can hit that 2 million. So, of course, my name's Wolf Goerlich, director at CBI. I work with security people and advise them on how to get projects done and programs done and what have you.
And then I have sound, maybe. Hi. I'm Stephanie Schaefer-Pond. I'm the principal consultant at Zafira Consulting, which I founded in 2009 to do 3 things. Number 1, I work with business owners to get them more engaged. Number 2, I work with donors, philanthropists, and grant funders to make their giving dollars more impactful. And number 3, and the one that's really relevant to what we're talking about today, I work with service providers to help them be more effective in the work that they're doing. So, right now I work with about 480 doctors across 23 specialties. Everything from family medicine and general practitioners all the way up to super specialized things like OB-GYN, colorectal surgery. You name it, I've probably seen it happen. When I try to describe my job, I talk about teaching people to be more human. I do a lot of empathy coaching, a lot of communications, a lot of this is how you deliver bad news in a way that leaves your patient feeling supported. I do a lot of this is how you explain your treatment plan and what they need to do to get to where you want to be in a way that gets your patients buy-in. Or the way my son explains it, I'm a don't be a dick instructor. 90% of what I do is teaching people don't be a dick. And the nice thing about my field is that we're actually starting to be able to quantify that. CMS, which is the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, part of the government, has started doing patient satisfaction surveys. Satisfaction, not the same thing as patient happiness, but that's a different talk. But they send surveys, or they call people, or they email people, and they ask about their experiences with their providers. And not just, did your doctor give you the right medicine for your diagnosis? They're asking, did your doctor talk to you in a way that you understood? Did your doctor make you feel like you were listened to? Did you feel cared about when you were there? And the amazing thing is that they're starting to tie provider reimbursement rates to those scores. So now, if you're a dick, you make less than if you're a nice person, which is why I'm all of a sudden getting work. So we can quantify what it looks like to be a dick in healthcare. There's a company called Press Ganey that administers slightly more than half of these surveys for healthcare providers in America. And what they have found is that if your patient satisfaction rating is below 94%, you're actually in the bottom 50% of providers nationwide. So if you're shopping for a doctor, do you want somebody that's in the bottom 50%? Or do you want that top 10% because everybody wants the best doctor? We're talking about our lives, our health. The problem with this is, it's a tiny, tiny playing field. There is 2.7% growth between the bottom 50% and the top 10%. And that spectrum is where providers are starting to get paid based on where they fall. So one of the things we've been doing at Zafira is tracking, can we see a difference? Can we see an improvement between our provider scores before we work with them and after? And what we found is that when the providers that bring us in use the strategies that we give them, the don't be a dick techniques, we actually see their scores improve by about 1.24%, which, if you're thinking on a scale of 0 to 100, is tiny. But when you realize that your reimbursement, your compensation, your bonuses, all of that is tied to a playing field of slightly less than 3%, that's some huge movement. So we're actually able to quantify and count what it looks like if a provider's a dick. So when I say I'm a don't be a dick instructor, what does that look like in practice? My job here today is to tell you guys stories. Most of my stories are frustrating, they're irritating, they're sad, because that's where we draw lessons from. Nobody has a great healthcare experience and finds lessons that they can learn from that. Usually it's where we've made mistakes that we find opportunities for growth. So my job is to tell you stories. And I'm going to start with the biggest dick I've ever met, because his karma is to always and forever be my what not to do lesson. We've given this talk twice now. I present on my own frequently, and he is in every single talk I do. So what happened? I was at a urologist's office, and I was shadowing him, as one does in my field, and we heard screaming. A woman had come in. She was supposed to have an appointment with a nurse. She was having an outpatient procedure, and she was full-throated, bloody murder, somebody stealing my children screaming. And she was demanding to see her doctor. So I looked at him and I said, well, I guess we're adding one to your schedule today. And off we went. We went in. The minute we walked into the exam room, the first thing she said is, you did not explain this to me. You did not tell me what was going to happen. And she didn't know that the outpatient procedure was going to be performed by his nurse and not by him. And she started bombarding him with questions. Does she know what she's doing? You went to med school. She's only a nurse. You have the white coat. You're the urologist. Is it going to hurt more if she does it? Is it going to be safe? What can I expect? Because you never told me what to expect. And she was getting more and more worked up and more panicked. And all of a sudden she stopped. And she said, right before my sister died, she brought us all together and she told us, and this was the moment when my doctor cut her off and changed the subject. So we never found out what her dying sister told her. She never got an apology. She never got an explanation. She never got her questions answered. And when we walked out of that exam room, the minute the door shut, he looked at me, rolled his eyes, and said, she has a behavioral health diagnosis. I'm pretty sure she's schizophrenic. Usually I save my comments for the end, and usually I'm pretty nice. I get paid to teach people to not be a dick. So it behooves me to not be one myself. But in this case, I made a rare exception. And I basically sat him down and I said, somebody can be schizophrenic and be scared. They can be schizophrenic and be in pain. They can be schizophrenic and be grieving. Nothing that she was trying to communicate to you is negated by the fact that she might have a behavioral health diagnosis. So the lesson we draw from that is just because somebody's crazy doesn't necessarily mean that they're wrong.
And that never happens in security, right? Everyone is saying that we love our users. So when we think about, yeah, that really is annoying. There. That's good. When we think about that whole doctor-patient mentality, right? And we start thinking about applying it to information security. At the end of the day, it's behooving on us to work with the end users, to not call them crazy, to listen to them, to engage them, and to get them to do the right things. Because if they don't, balloons pop. And you're like, wait a minute, what do you mean balloons pop? But follow me through here. One of my favorite security analogies at the moment is balloon tower defense. Does anyone play balloon tower defense? Yeah, it's fun. And so if you guys see me like playing it at a client site, I'm like, no, I'm totally researching right now. Because you guys all agree this is a security technique. Yeah, exactly. But when you think about it, and this can be demonstrated by a threat model, this could be demonstrated by a narrative, this could be demonstrated by, a kill chain or attack path, whatever you want to use. When we think about it, there's always that path the criminal is going to take through the network. A series of holes and vulnerabilities and decisions that have been made through an organization that allows the bad guys to get through. And as they're moving forward, right, it's up to, not us, it's up to the developer, the IT guy, the operations guy, the office manager, the person running our vendor risk management, to do the right thing. Because if they don't, 99 red balloons go by, no one wants to hear me sing. Okay? If they don't, bad things happen, and they exfiltrate data. So we start thinking about engagement as being a layer of defense. Engagement as a way to do empathy and compassion. Engagement as a way to do the inspiration and instruction so we can build this volunteer security department, so we can build this volunteer force. Because much like the patient's health is in their hands, the security of the organization is in those other people's hands. And ultimately, we need to be fighting for the user, right? Which is something I personally tend to forget when I'm trying to configure a firewall or configure a security control. So we need to fight for that user. And we need to make sure that at the end of the day, it's a person, it's a human being.
So we've heard a lot of talk about viruses and vaccines and how to present things in computers. These are conversations I have every day in healthcare. And one of the questions that often comes up in the patients is, well, what's in it? What are you giving me? What are you putting into my body? Is it going to hurt? One of the more interesting things that I saw was at a rheumatologist's office. So we're talking rheumatoid arthritis, a lot of autoimmune diseases. And he had a patient who had severe rheumatoid arthritis. And he's like, it's okay, I've got the perfect medication for you. It's amazing, it'll change your life. It's Humira. We see the commercials for this all the time. And the commercials, I almost want Humira. It sounds like the greatest thing ever. Turns out that when a doctor prescribes Humira, at the same time they give their patient a big stack of financial assistant paperwork because Humira costs $20,000 a year. And most of the time it's not covered by insurance because there are cheaper options that don't work as well, that you have to go to the hospital to do, but it's cheaper. So in order to really get Humira, you have to go to the company that manufactures it, submit almost like a tax return, and hope that they subsidize part of it for you. So this doctor really wanted this patient on Humira. And he starts talking to this man and his wife about how his condition is devastating. It's going to destroy his body. It is going to end his quality of life. It is going to be absolutely horrific if they can't get on this medication. So it's really important that they fill out these financial forms. And the whole time he's talking, I'm watching his patient's wife just sink into herself. And afterwards I told him, this is what I'm hearing. hearing a lot of scary language. I'm hearing devastating. I'm hearing destructive. I'm hearing destroying. I'm all about reality testing and making sure that patients know the reality of their situation. But it's important that we not scare them. And he looked at me and he goes, but that was exactly what I was trying to do. I wanted him scared. I wanted them terrified. Because then they'll come back. Because it's really important that they follow up. And if they don't understand, they won't come back. And I said, well, human nature is to run away from the things that are scary. When the saber-toothed tiger comes after the caveman runs away from the tiger. We don't stand and engage with the tiger. So if the goal is to bring him back, I'm not sure that scaring him is the way to accomplish that. Which brings us to...
Yeah. Doubt, fear, FUD. Now we're talking. So, I'm gonna let's see, first two rows. You. Hey, hi. You guys, you're on my board of directors. Remember that. I'm gonna come back to you. So, in my role, I meet with a lot of CISOs and directors, and oftentimes, as part of a strategy session and whatnot, they'll be like, let me show you some of the slides that I recently shared. I'm like, okay, this is good. And true story, the guy pulls out the slide deck. He's like, this is the slides that I showed to my board of directors, and it was wonderful. All right, so you guys pretend you're board of directors, and I got my PowerPoint, and I'm like, the world is ending. Your grandkids are not safe. Our stock's going to plummet. And right now, the Chinese and Russians are working hard to steal everything that you developed. So I need $50,000 for this firewall and another $200,000 for the services. Can you guys approve? And he's like, it worked marvelously. They were all scared and freaked out, and they asked me great questions, and I got the money. Do you think you got the money next year, though? Right? I thought I spent $250,000 so my kids would be safe. I know, but there's new threats. APT, Cyber One, Cloud, the deep web, the dark web, the blackest of black web. Side note, if anyone knows the difference between dark web and black web, I'd love to hear it. I heard it on a marketing slide, and I think that's awesome. But yeah, we lead with fear. We scare the hell out of people, right? And if you guys have taken any psychology classes or you looked at things, this isn't very effective. And it works the first year, maybe, but by the time you get to year 2 and year 3 and year 4, no, it's not working at all. Which may explain why the average CISO lifespan is 1 year and 6 months, right? And then they're out, they're gone. Because they go and scare the board again. The board's like, I'm so sick of this guy. Why hasn't he solved the problem yet? So scaring is really bad. Now, there's some concepts in psychology around this. There's the lizard brain, right? And I love this concept. There's the lizard brain, which makes you want to get Ronald Reagan and gun down your bad guys. The lizard brain, right, which is where fear shifts everyone to, which is not a good place for making informed, rational decisions. Monkey brain a little bit better, right? Monkey brain is mammalian. That's the center where you can do a little bit of thinking, you can do a little processing, and respond. I like monkey brain. Right? The last one is, of course, Spock, the large, thoughtful, rational person. The problem with FUD is we automatically shift everyone down to the raptor. And they don't make good decisions. They're scared. Like you were mentioning, they don't want to come back. They don't want to engage with you. They want to run or fight the tiger and whatnot. So if we think about those fear and uncertainty and doubt, if we got everyone freaked out, they're running off the map, right? They're not going to stick around and help us fight our battles. But if we rely on Spock, that can be tricky too. Spock's pretty smart, but obviously if you're always rational, anything takes you off that, you can't really rely on it. If you think about martial arts, it's that training of the body to do the right thing, training the mind to do the right thing, right? Getting the mammalian to automatically kick in no matter how tired you are. Oftentimes it's exactly what I think of when I'm thinking about this attack path. We need to basically line up the monkeys so that even if they're tired, they're exhausted, they're a little bit afraid, they're a little bit uncomfortable, they do the right thing. It's all about lining up the monkeys. But you're like, man, how do I line up the frickin' monkeys? What does that even mean, Wolf? And a lot of it's this super secret, tricky thing that you're going to cover.
Listen to them. Talk to them. Ask them questions. Find out what's important to them. I know, these are baffling, mind-boggling concepts. That's why I'm a Don't Be a Dick instructor. I teach people to do the obvious things. A lot of times, we listen with our responses already planned out. We already know what we're going to say. I see it in healthcare settings. I see it in every setting. Somebody goes, oh, well, my back's, oh, that's your arthritis. Well, my computer's, oh, well, you haven't updated your antivirus. We don't listen. We don't let people finish their thoughts. One of my favorite examples of this is from the show Scrubs. The JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association, did a survey several years ago, and they asked doctors, what medical show is most representative of your experience? Chicago Hope, ER, St. Elsewhere, all of them. Overwhelming majority said Scrubs. So I have a video clip that I use when I'm doing group trainings for my doctors that we're going to try and show. We'll see if we can get sound.
Nope.
Maybe, maybe not.
Nope.
Nope.
So back to the clip. Yeah. Scrubs did an entire episode on this. An entire episode dedicated to the fact that how much time did they give people?
They gave her 15-second increments. They said that really all you need to spend with the patient is 15 seconds. Now, in healthcare, we've done time usage surveys, and we found that it takes the patient roughly 2 minutes to tell their full story, to get everything out from the, I can't believe it's been a year since I was here for my physical last, how have you been? My kids are so big. Let me show you pictures. Look, she just had a dance recital, and by the way, my foot really, really hurts this time. Can we look at that while we're doing all the rest? 2 minutes. Over the course of the episode, you'll see the little timer. They talk to her in 15-second bursts. And the whole point of the episode is that if they had spent the time to listen to her consistently, they would have put pieces together sooner to find out that she wasn't having a physical health problem. She was actually having suicidal thoughts. One of the fun things I always point out when I train my doctors is that if you add up all of those little 15-second bursts across the episode, they add up to slightly less than 2 minutes. One of my favorite responses I've ever gotten is at the end of this clip, they realized that the problems that she were having was self-induced. And at a training I did, one of the doctors looked at me, she goes, well, that would never happen. I said, that scenario? She goes, yeah, that would never happen. She goes, we would never go back to the hospital once we've left for the night. And that's really what it comes down to. It comes down to that listening and that spending that 2 minutes up front to get the full story, the full scenario, to get everything that you need to know so that you have a fuller picture and you can make a complete assessment of what's going on. That's just as true in my world as it is in yours.
You have 4 seconds left. 3, 2, 1. No, so I train my academy guys. These are like junior people, right? So they're like right out of college, or maybe they've had like 1 or 2 years experience. And I'm like, salespeople talk, good consultants listen. And 9 times out of 10, if you're in a meeting, just listen. Give them another beat. Maybe they have more to say. And 9 times out of 10, that's when you find out the really interesting things, right? How many times have you guys been in a meeting with someone from sales and and you just glaze over and you're like waiting for them to get done so you can get the free sandwich? I love the free sandwich. Wish I didn't have so much talking. So a good example of this would be we were going to deploy a firewall, and part of it was part of a wider critical security controls audit and review. So we did this critical security audit, and we had talked to them, and we're like, what's your controls? And they're like, everything's fine, because everything's always fine when you're doing an audit. And then we got the firewall guy together, and he's mapping it out and whatnot. And I finally got the sales guy to leave the room. And I'm like, this is a pretty good design. He's like, yeah, it is a good design. Like, what are you thinking about when you put this in? And he opened up. He's like, I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about that. And, we got breached over here. They say it's encrypted, but you think it's encrypted. It's not encrypted. And he laid out the whole map. And I'm like, wow, this firewall is going to help you there. But have you thought about these other 2 things? Have you thought about, like, the proxy service? And have you thought about maybe, like, endpoint agent reporting back? He goes, no, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, maybe we should look at that. So we put in place an authenticated proxy, put in place a couple other controls, and that handled all the real reason why they were getting the firewall. They weren't getting a firewall because they wanted to lock out access to the internet. They're getting a firewall because the users kept getting infected with malware and ransomware, and thought, well, if we had a better firewall, that would solve it. But we just walked in and said, you need a better firewall. We need a better firewall. Let me tell you how great our firewalls are. I want that firewall. Here's the price. Thank you very much. You know what I mean? 15 seconds. What are you doing this for again? Ah, yes. So it's all about listening to line up the monkeys. And also then, as you're having that conversation, right, begin to return some sense of control to the person who's making the decision. The IT guy who's getting the firewall wants to have control to solve that problem with the users, right? Whatever it may be, begin to return some sense of control to them. Because another thing that so happens with IT security guys, and one of the reasons why, like, the room scatters when we walk in, which is kind of cool. Like, I'm tall, so I kind of want to do the black cape and like the Darth Vader thing and walk in and watch everyone run. But that's neither here nor there. One of the reasons why that happens is because we're seen as the department that takes away control. I know this is how you do it, but we're going to change how you do it, right? After her story, I'm going to tell you this guy who was very proud of his 17-point step on how to answer an email. That was just amazing.
Okay, so brace yourself. This is a sad story. But it's got a happy ending. It's all good. So I'm often asked when I'm presenting or even when I'm consulting why I started doing healthcare work. My background is not in healthcare. I'm terrified of needles. I get really queasy when I see blood, which makes observing doctors super fun. I really picked an awesome career field for having phobias. But my background is actually clinical social work. My specialty is cognitive behavioral therapy. So what I do by training is I change people's minds. I get them to reframe how they're thinking. I get them to shift their perceptions of situations and scenarios that they find themselves in. I don't know anything about healthcare. I can't tell somebody how to practice medicine better. I can only tell them how to be a better doctor. And the reason why I can do that is because 8 years ago, in 2008, my son almost died. We went for what was supposed to be a formality appointment. Walk in, get this checked out, check it off the list, walk out, come back, it's all good. And at that appointment, we ended up going directly to Children's Hospital in Michigan, in Detroit. And we didn't leave for 3 months. And when we left, he was on dialysis. When we left, he was on a transplant list. And we were told the day we got there that if I hadn't brought him in when we did, he probably would have died and we would have gotten his diagnosis at autopsy instead of later on that week. So my background is crisis and trauma. That's how I've always done my work in social work. I work with human trafficking survivors, with domestic violence survivors, with people that have really, really difficult situations. And I'm really good at telling people how to help somebody that's having a traumatic day. I'm an awesome person to have on the worst day of your life. Until I had a worst day of my life. Turns out all of that stuff that's super easy to apply to other people flies right out the window when it's you and your kid. So I got into this field because of that. Because all of a sudden I had to see what it looks like when you're going through trauma, what it looks like when you're immersed in healthcare, what it looks like when you have 17 doctors across 4 different specialties rotating in and out of your child's room every day. Which brings me to my story. Because one day I had 2 nursing students come in with my child's meds. Now, he was little for 8, tiny. That was part of the problem with his medical condition. And we could make him do pretty much anything we wanted him to do. Oh, you're scared of needles? So am I. I can leave the room and your dad can hold you down while they draw your blood. Oh, you have to have this procedure that we know is going to be scary and painful for you? Not a problem. We can sedate you and we can make you do it. You have zero control here. We're bigger. We know you need this. What we know is better and more important than what you feel, so you're just going to have to deal with it because we're bigger and stronger. Except he figured out one thing that none of us had thought of. Nobody can make you open your mouth if you don't want to. The jaw is one of the strongest muscles in the body. And he, at the time, was taking slightly over 40-something pills a day. Except he wouldn't take them. So these 2 nursing students come in, and I go, look at the clock. And they freaked out. They're like, are we late? We know that these are time sensitive, and we're sorry. We got a little confused because there's a lot of them. I'm like, no, you're on time. You're fine. Look at the clock. They're like, okay. I said, this is the moment where one of the 2 of you decides that pediatrics isn't for you. And they laughed. But an hour and 45 minutes later, when they were still begging my child to open his mouth and take his meds, one of them looked at me and went, you know what, you're right. I liked oncology better than this. And that was my kid. So his primary doctor came in, sat down with me, and said, this is what we're going to do. We are going to send you home for the weekend. It is now Friday afternoon. You are going home for 2 days. You are coming back Monday morning. When you come back on Monday morning, he will be taking his medication, or on Tuesday morning, we're going to put in a G-tube, and it won't matter whether or not he opens his mouth anymore. For those of you that don't know, a G-tube goes through your abdomen right into your stomach. You just pour the stuff right in. It also means that he would never be able to eat really ever again. Now, in 8 years of dealing with life-threatening medical conditions and a career based on trauma care, that's the one time I've broken down and I've cried. But we took him home, and we got him home. And I sat down with him, and I'm like, okay, look, now I'm scared too. I get it. You've been scared this whole time, and we kind of didn't care because we were busy keeping you alive. But now I'm scared. So you got to help Mom not be scared. What do I have to do to get you to take your medication? What is the problem here? And he looked at me and goes, it's gross. And I said, what do you mean? Of course it's gross. Like, it's medication. Well, I started looking at what they were giving him, and one of his meds was sodium bicarbonate. baking soda in tablet form that they wanted him to take 4 times a day. So 16 tablets of straight baking soda to be chewed up and eaten over the course of the day. How many of you guys would want to do that, even if it meant saving your life? I wouldn't. I tell him now that I've made him do things that as an adult, I would check out against doctor's orders and just go. So, Mom hopped on Google, and I started researching. And it turns out that the same thing that does, Tums do. So on Monday morning, I walked in and I'm like, I've got a plan. Stop giving him the nasty shit. Let's try the fruit-flavored yummy stuff and see if that works. Will that work for you? And they did the math, and they did the chemistry, and they talked to the pharmacy, and they realized that would totally work. And all of a sudden, he was taking his meds again. Because for a minute, in the midst of all of this chaos and craziness, we had given him back a sense of control. We had taken a minute to actually listen to him as if his opinion mattered, even though he wasn't the doctor, he wasn't the grown-up, he wasn't the parent. It didn't matter what his role was. He still had a voice. And the minute we started listening to that, we got changed. We got to where we needed him to be.
That's always a hard story to follow up on, you know?
I know.
And then the server wasn't patched, and I yelled at the guy.
If you want, I can tell a human trafficking story next time.
No, thank you. We oftentimes take that attitude of, well, it's the user. They're on my equipment. I can force them to do whatever I want them to do. They're in my walls. I can tell them they need to check in. They are in my world, and I can hold them down until they... Right? That's like our default, de facto attitude a lot of times. There's this IT guy I was having lunch with. He was a director, and he was very pleased. We were talking about ransomware. He's like, I have stopped the ransomware threat. That is fantastic. He goes, nothing gets by us. I think that's really good. It's we're dinner. I got to ask you though, how did you do it? Because so many people are. You got to tell me your secret. He's like, check this out. I have a 17-point process I have every one of my users follow when they get an email with attachment. Process 1, don't open it. Forward it to the help desk with an explanation of who the person is. Process 2, I've got this other guy who scans it. Process 3, they're allowed to open it, but only on certain machines where we got this antivirus. So they'd like Telnet in, or not Telnet, Citrix in, RDP in, right? And then they open it in this secure environment. And then, and he's like, 17 steps. And like the 17th step is forward it from the Citrix server back to your real account where you can open it there if it's all right. I'm like, and people are doing this? Well, we tell them to. What choice do they have? Have you thought about Tums? He's like, what? But, because that's what our attitudes are, right? We very rarely step back and say, hey, what is the ability for us to create a control that does the right thing? So again, thinking about like the reptilian brain, the mammalian brain, the Spock brain, right? It's the limbic and the cortex and the neocortex. We're really good at saying, here's exactly what we're going to force you to do. But as a security community, if we were to step back and analyze, okay, it tastes yucky. What about Tums, right? You have to do 17 steps. What if we do one thing or employ some security control further on, right? What if we give you some anti-lock brakes? If you guys have ever seen like the TED Talk, Start With Why, there's also a book on that. I love that concept. Basically starting with why. Why does it matter to you, and why don't you want to do it? Or why do you want to do it, right? For the lucky few security people who are involved ahead of the process with like, we're building this new system. That's fantastic. It's going to make us tons of money. That's fantastic. It runs Telnet on the internet. Wait a minute. Why? You know, if we can get to that point and have that conversation, it's great. And what it basically boils down to is, how can we feed those velociraptors and pet those monkeys, right? How can we engage people and kind of soothe the velociraptor, give the guy a banana, and then have that good discussion about what controls need to be in place. But whenever I have this conversation a lot of times with security people, especially in like the local community, they're like, damn it, Jim. I got to just be a hacker, not work with people, right? I'm a doctor, not a veterinarian. And we start having great discussions about how we could actually codify that and make that simpler. One of the ways that we often do that is by handing out like, hey, here's some steps that you can do. Here's a 3-step process that makes your job secure. Mr. Developer, here's a wiki that you can follow where you can cut and copy your code just like you do on GitHub and Stack Overflow. Really? Yes, and secure. Oh, wow, thank you. Cut and paste. So any way we can make it easier, right? So she was telling me the story, and I think this is a phenomenal story, because if this happened in security, we would all celebrate. It would be like the keynote for 16 months. It would be phenomenal. In her world, she came up with 5 questions, which we're going to go through in just a minute, in the next 20 minutes. 15, actually. In her world, she came up with a bunch of questions and ways that the doctor could not be a dick. And those questions were then printed on all the name badges. They actually are redoing the name badges on one of her hospitals so that the doctors have them right in the back. And I love that. I want someone to come up to me and go, you know what? I was so good at security that they reprinted all the name tags. It says, don't click that link. Think before you open that. They really don't want to send you money. Whatever the questions may be, you know what I mean? The ability to affect change that way is phenomenal. So you want to cover what those questions are?
So the first one is the most basic. It's also the least medical. What do you think's going on? My doctors never ask this because they solve puzzles. You walk in with a list of symptoms. They tell you what's wrong with you. Then you leave and pay a copay and everybody's happy. Asking the question, what do you think's going on, can really elicit some phenomenal information though. One of my favorite stories is an older patient, mid-80s, maybe late 80s, with diabetes had come into his primary care office because his foot was hurting really bad. He was having sharp shooting pains up and down his foot. And the doctor is telling me afterwards, I know that he's only marginally compliant. I know how severe his diabetes is. I looked at all his lab values before I walked in. I walked in knowing that this was going to be a really hard conversation. I was going to have to tell him we might have reached a point where we have to amputate. But because she'd been working with me for a minute, she took her 2 minutes and said, well, what do you think's going on? He looked at her and goes, I think I have a tack in my shoe. You could have heard, pardon the pun, a pin drop, because she looked at him and she went, what? He said, my arthritis is really bad. I'm not as young as I used to be. I can't really bend over anymore. I think I stepped on a tack the other day. I think it's in my shoe, but I can't, really check. So she took off his shoe. She knelt down, untied his shoes, and took off his shoe. And there was a thumbtack that had gone through the sole of his shoe and was sticking up in, and it was causing sharp shooting foot pains. So the what do you think going on question can sometimes save some pretty catastrophic or dramatic interventions that can be solved by taking a look, asking a question, pulling the thumbtack out of the shoe. Another non-medical question, and this is the warm, fuzzy social work question that my doctors always roll their eyes at. Where do you want to be this time next year? And I don't mean medically. Obviously, if you have diabetes now, you wish that you don't have diabetes next year. If you're on a transplant list now, you wish that you have a transplant next year. That's not what I mean. I mean the things like, I want my arthritis under control enough that I can get back out in the garden again. It's really important to me that I'm able to take the kids to Disney. I've been saving up for it for years, and I'm really scared that this heart condition is going to derail me. I want to know where they want to be in their lives. Because what that does is that gives us the information we need to sell the treatment plan. Because it comes back to the starting with why. Nobody's going to do the how or the what unless they know why they need to do it. And it's got to be their why, not ours. So your why for taking your insulin might be because I would like my CMS rates for diabetes care to be positive so that I get my quarterly bonus. Their why is because I really want to be able to take my grandkids to Disney next year. Which why is going to be more impactful when you're explaining to them why they have to start insulin injections? It's not going to be your why. They don't care about the bonuses. But if you can say, if we do this, if we can get you on this track, this is how you're going to move your health, and then you're going to be able to make it to Disney next year. Asking those questions is hugely important because it gives us the information we need to be effective salespeople on our treatment plans. How does this impact your daily life? Huge question, especially in healthcare, but also in IT. 17-step email process, I can tell you right now, my non-tech opinion would be, fuck that, I'm just going to use Hotmail. Wouldn't do it. I would be in that, are they actually doing it group that's not doing it. The same's true in healthcare. What about this is going to be difficult for you? Tell me what the barriers are now so that we can talk about them and brainstorm them. You have to start insulin injections, and you're terrified of needles. I get that. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that now, before I send you home and you're back in 3 weeks in the ER because you were too scared to do it, because you just couldn't bring yourself. Anything can be like that, and it's important that we know what the barriers are. That way we can address them in the moment. A, it makes our clients feel more supported. B, it gives us better outcomes. And C, it gives us the chance to overcome objections and barriers before they really become active barriers. What about this might be the most difficult for you? Did I just do this one? I totally did. So that's that slide, the one I just talked about that wasn't the one that was on the screen. This is the one that was on the screen. How does this impact your daily life? This is another one of those sales things. If we know how it impacts them, if we know how their symptoms are impacting their ability to garden, their ability to take a vacation with their family, set aside the health things. Maybe your body is in perfect physical health to go walking around Disney. But you know what? We just put you on Humira, $20,000 a year. Disney budget gone. These are the things that we want to know because they allow us to problem solve, allow us to work together so that we can sell the treatment plan and so that we can get them to where we want them to be in a way that they're able to accomplish. Which comes back to what might make it difficult for them. The last and most important question, what questions do you have for me? I see this in my healthcare providers maybe 25% of the time. And when I do, it's usually like this. Okay, awesome, great visit. I'm glad you have all your paperwork. The nurse will be in with your discharge stuff. Questions. Do you have any questions before I leave? Their hand's already on the door. They don't care about your questions. Having that time in that sitting present moment to say, this is a lot to take in. This is a lot of information. This is new information. This is information we're changing. This might be scary information. What do you need to know from me is huge. Those 5 questions really help us get to the why, the individual personalized why for every patient that my providers see. And they help us elicit the information that we need from them to sell their treatment plans in a way that they're going to buy into and they're going to follow into. Because I said so didn't work with my 8-year-old, it's sure as hell not going to work with an 88-year-old. And yet, that's still the primary approach that we tend to take. It's you.
It's the approach I always take, because I said so. And give more than 15 seconds, right? Give them the time to talk through it. So one of my favorite CISOs, he works at a hospital. And he's one of the few guys that, like, people bring things to him, which is very unusual for security. He's a fantastic person. And he told me this story. He's like, yeah, you know where most of our risk could probably be? I'm like, what's that? He goes, HR. Okay? So yeah, because you think about it, everything you need to steal an identity comes in the HR department. And we're going through mergers, we're hiring all the time, there's a lot of turnover in certain positions. It's all about HR. Okay, that makes sense. And so he went down to the HR department, and he's like, what do you guys think you're doing right? What do you think you're doing wrong? I'm like, well, everything comes in, and here's how we do it, and everything, it seems to be fine. We have some problems because, sometimes they don't email us the right stuff, and you got to go back and forth. I'm like, you're doing a lot of the over email? Yeah, just have them fill out the form. Oh, okay. Where are you working on as a department? Where do you guys think you're going to be in about a year? Oh, we're working on this new integration with the EMR. We're working on this new integration with ADP, and there's some online forms coming. That's pretty exciting. We're having a hard time getting the budget for that. Okay. What do you think? What do you think some of the risks you may have? She's like, well, not getting the right forms or not getting the right insurance and those types of things, and maybe someone getting at the information. And so he's like, well, let me tell you a story. And he proceeded to tell about how identity theft worked. He proceeded to tell about the lives that were ruined by it. He proceeded to give a little bit of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. But when he got to the doubt, he kind of pulled back a little bit. He got their attention. He's like, yeah, here's problems, but this isn't catastrophic. You shouldn't. This isn't terrifying. This is just some of the risks out there I want you to be aware of. Why don't we brainstorm? What do you think we could do about this? Like, well, I didn't even know about that. What could we maybe not do it over email? I was like, yeah, that's a good idea. So, but if only we had that system for the forms. Like, what? It's interesting. I'm going to the budget committee, and what if I was to have some conversation with them and lend some credence to the fact that we need to speed that up from a security perspective, not just from an HR perspective. Like, we could get the system faster? Yeah, absolutely, we could get the system faster. So they start collaborating, and it's like, well, okay, here's the new process. What if this could be hard for you? Like, well, this part over here would probably slow us down. So they reworked that. So added a little bit of additional risk, but eased off the controls a bit so they could get the job done. And then pushed it forward and deployed the system. And within about 3 months, completely reduced the risk of identity theft in HR. And HR was excited about it, and HR trumpeted, and HR saw it as a win because now they got their system earlier, right? These exact same questions, we oftentimes don't take the time to ask them, but asking them can drive things quicker, right? A lot quicker. So, speaking of quick, we got like 5-6 minutes.
Okay.
We'll run through a couple things about doctor and security, tie it together.
Got it.
Like M&Ms. Now I'm hungry.
M&Ms, everybody's least favorite meeting in healthcare. Every week, the doctors in a hospital setting gather together and they talk about the deaths that have occurred in the week and the major boo-boos that have happened in a week and the people that were on call for them. The people that were the ones that made the code, that called the code, the people that made the medical error. They have to stand in front of their peers and they discuss what happened. And it's not a punitive thing. It's a let's learn from this. It's a what happened. It's a how can we fix it? How can we improve it next time sort of meeting.
We have this is called Twitter. People tweet out. We laugh at them. There's a lot of retweeting that goes on. No, very rarely do I think we stop to do those lessons learned. There's maybe only about 2 organizations I work with that have that cadence, and they're actually one of the better organizations. So one's a weekly cadence, another's a monthly cadence, who actually have part of their staffing. They're like, here's what we tried to do. We tried to implement the system. We had a breach, or we fought off a breach. Here's what we learned. Here's what worked. Here's what we didn't. I think we need more of the stop, pause, reflect, and feedback in every single security program, because it isn't something that's inherently built in. Other than Twitter, and I kind of joke, but we're really good at blaming the victim on Twitter.
Blaming the victim is one of my biggest pet peeves in healthcare. We get well, they wouldn't have diabetes if they ate better. Or I keep telling them to lose weight and it never happens. And I keep telling them to take this medication and they never follow through. And they complain about the side effects, but they don't understand how important it is. It's really important. One of my main goals as a healthcare consultant is to move my providers from looking at their patients and classifying them as victims to moving them into being able to see them as collaborative partners in their healthcare. Because the doctor has to have the patient's buy-in in order for anything to happen. Nobody wins, doctor or patient, if we're blaming the patients.
And collaborative patient behavior in the healthcare is exactly what we're looking at security, right? If we have a true volunteer security program where we're having them collaborate with us and fixing these problems, we can't then go laugh at them behind their back, which kind of sucks because that's like part of the fun part. No, but we've got to take that moment and stop blaming them. We also do that, again, on Twitter all the time. Oh, look at them, they let the bad guys in. Oh, look at them, they messed up. How can we get beyond that if we're going to be fighting for the user? A lot of it is just stepping away from that attitude.
Everybody thinks that their doctors are still the old-fashioned doctors that carry the little black bag, they show up, they give the medication, they take the temperature, they leave, they go home. That is not the reality of modern medicine anymore. Doctors are doing academic research. They are writing papers in the same way that we do in academia. They are managing staff, training staff, doing EMR, electronic medical records, which everybody knows in this room and in my world is a raging clusterfuck right now. Nobody likes EMR, but they're responsible for it. And again, it's tied to patient security, patient outcomes, performance, and pay.
Yeah, and we're starting to see the same thing, right? Oh, you maintain patch management or vulnerability management? You should patch our servers. Oh, you're monitoring the firewalls? Have you ever thought about administering the firewalls? We got to be very careful, I think, right now in security to not take on all those operational roles, because that's really going to detract from where we are. And again, some of the best programs I'm seeing draw that very fine line. We do control and review. You guys do implementation. Because otherwise, it's incredibly easy to burn out.
Which brings me to my favorite social worky term that I use with my doctors that he hates. Self-care. As much as our providers are busy, you guys are crazy busy too, and it's really important to have things outside of your field, outside of your scope of work, that you enjoy and that you can fall back on so that you have sustainable energy and you're able to avoid burning out. I always say that of all the doctors that I work with, I have 480 on my roster right now, my all-time favorite doctor is still Dr. Who. And I use the analogy that you can only save the world so many times before you have to regenerate. So if you don't like self-care, think about it in terms of regeneration. But make time for yourself to do things outside of work-related things. Hackers are a lot like doctors in that you go into this work because you're passionate about it and it intrigues you and it gets your mind going. So you tend to play in the same spaces that you work. That's awesome. But have other non-worky play spaces too.
Yeah, so anyone here actually managed to only work 40, 50 hours a week? No one does. But honestly, this is another weird thing that I found. Some of the best programs I have It's like name and shame. You work 80 hours a week, and most of us are going, yeah, because she's pretty badass. And they're like, what the hell is wrong with you? Did you not prioritize your time right? Get out. Go have some fun. Have some sun. Because we can't be listening. We can't be engaging the users. We can't do anything else we talked about if we're working 80, 90 hours and all stressed out ourselves.
This is you. I already talked about this.
Oh, this is me. Hey, great. So I loved Ian's point about measuring success. I really wish we had press gaining. We don't have good metrics. And so that thought of what is our success, how do we measure it? We don't have it as an industry. We definitely don't have it in an individual program. And again, some of the best programs I see take more of that press gaining effect. Here's how satisfied our users are. Here's their level of engagement with our programs. Here's their ability to successfully complete these processes. Some of the very technical ones I see struggle are like, here's how many hits we had on our firewall. We stopped APT, right? Here's how many viruses we cleaned up this week. Who the heck really cares? The ability to tie those metrics up to something that means to the organization, via something like press gaining would be fantastic. I haven't seen too many people who are doing it, and if anyone is, hit me up, because this is something I want to focus on a lot.
Invest in the end. I do an entire 2-hour training on the last 5 minutes of a doctor's visit, of what we need to do to wrap up, to synthesize, to gain buy-in, and to send them out the door feeling maybe not happy, but satisfied. Satisfaction can occur no matter what your health status is. Likewise, satisfied can happen no matter what the security status is. A security system might be completely crazy and full of things, but if he's come in and found them all, and now you have a plan to move forward, your client might be satisfied even if they're not happy. Same in my world. So when I talk about investing in the end, I tell my doctors, everything you've told them over the course of a visit, say it again. Then ask them to tell you what they just heard. Because statistics have shown that in the healthcare setting, patients don't understand or don't agree with 50% of what their doctors tell them. So apply that to your world. If your clients don't understand what you're telling them, are they going to be able to apply it effectively? Or in the 17-point email chain, if they don't agree with it, are they going to be willing to apply it at all? So that talk back, that teach back is important. Tell me what you just heard. That also gives you a chance to correct the misinformation and to find the areas where they're not agreeing so that you can use those 5 questions. Where do you want to be? What's important to you? What might be difficult about this? To sell them and to get the buy-in that you need to follow through. Investing in the end is probably the most crucial part of any visit, especially when you're doing a consultation. I use it in healthcare. I use it in my nonprofit consults. I know that you use it a lot with your security clients.
My gut tells me that 50% of the customers don't believe what I'm saying and don't understand it when I'm presenting, right? Do we invest in the end? No. The pen testers are like, I got all the things. I got DA. We're like, high five. And then what? What? Anything after that? No. So it's going back and explaining, making it relevant, and taking that next step. A lot of times we win technically, either on the red team by getting DA, or even on the blue team. We're like, we put in the firewall, we deployed server hardening everything. Awesome. Now what? I don't know. I think I did my part. Really? So it's that following up and tying it back to what it means to them and how it matters. So summing up this talk, right? Engagement, I think it's a critical missing skill in InfoSec. We're great technically. Security culture is coming a ways away. And the next step is actually having that really tight engagement loop with the individuals who are doing it. It means that we need to start with why. We need to feed those raptors. We need to pet the monkeys and move folks into areas that they can be successful at. Using FUD a little bit more appropriately, not just scaring the hell out of people, but if we do scare them a little bit, let's clear out the uncertainty and doubt and say what the hell we're going to do about it. And ultimately, we need to be fighting for the user. And what this looks like is when the bad guys are coming, when the attack is happening, when they're following that attack path, we got a freaking catapult. I want a catapult. No, we got everyone doing the right thing and pulling the right levers, right? Talking to the right people and in place and doing the right thing, such that in 2020 we can still be hiring, such that in 2020 InfoSec can still be growing, and hopefully we can really begin to move the needle in a meaningful way. So this has been Playing Doctor. We're going to be around. We'll be at the after party. Yeah, so if you guys have any questions, hit us up then. Hope you guys have a great BSides Cleveland.